Picture the scene. You're a young Jewish girl, the orphan daughter of exiled immigrants in the kingdom of Persia. Life is tough. Your people are looked down on, and aside from the old prophet talking of hope in a promised land, there doesn't seem to be much hope at all for your people. After all, what's the point in life in exile when you're made for a promised land? And suddenly, news arrives that the king of Persia, hardly known for being the most benign dictator, is looking for a new wife. And through a series of weird and seemingly random events, you are suddenly chosen to be his new wife. And you're Esther, the Queen of Persia. After becoming queen, Esther finds out that a bad guy named Haman is plotting to destroy the Jews and has sneakily persuaded the king to order their annihilation. This leaves Esther with a difficult choice. Does she stay out of politics and decide that God has only called her to be the king's wife? Or does she intervene and challenge the king, who was horrible to his last wife? Esther does, of course, make the right choice, and God's people are saved. What inspires me most about the story of Esther is how aware she is. We talk a lot about raising awareness in social justice circles, but it seems to me like Esther really got it. Firstly, Esther was very aware of her people's suffering. We see it happen to politicians today. They go from inner city London communities to the ivory towers of Westminster, and suddenly they forget about the people that they grew up with. But Esther didn't forget. She'd been through six months of beauty treatments, she'd lied about her nationality, she was now in the king's palace, a position that most of her Jewish kin could only dream of. And yet she never forgot her true identity, a Jewish follower of Yahweh, an exiled citizen of the Promised Land. So even as Queen of Persia, Esther never forgot the oppression of her people. But secondly, Esther was very aware of her personal role in God's big story. When Mordecai is persuading her to talk to the king, he says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" God brought her to the palace to be queen, yes, but not just to enjoy royal life, he had much bigger plans. Esther was not trained in politics, she had no experience of diplomacy or special knowledge in empire building. Yet God required nothing more from her. She was just the queen's wife at a time when wives had no standing, yet God was calling her, in her weakness, to something much bigger, to advocate on behalf of his people and thus shape Israel's history. We need to become more aware, like Esther was. Firstly, aware of the sufferings of our people, or else we might forget the poor, the marginalised and the oppressed. Genocide is sadly not just a thing of the Old Testament, yet most of us will go through our lives not doing anything about it, not thinking about it much. But this awareness must lead to action. Esther was no politician, she was an orphan daughter of immigrants, yet somehow, by chance, she ended up in the king's palace. Well, you and I have somehow, by chance, ended up living in a Western democracy. We somehow ended up at Oxford, with opportunities, career prospects and platforms that others can only dream of. So we actually face the same choice that Esther faced. The big question is, how will we use these opportunities? Will we carry on with our lives, doing the safe thing of ignoring suffering and pretending that we can't do anything about it? Or will we learn from Esther, the girl who was born to save a nation?